what are the implications of saying, as I've done in a rather provocative title to this lecture, that race is a discursive construct, that it's a sliding signifier? Statements of this kind have acquired a certain status in advanced critical circles these days, but it's very clear that critics and theorists don't always mean the same thing or draw the same inference from the statement when they make it. What's more, the idea that race might be described as a signifier is not one which, in my experience, has penetrated very deeply into or done very effectively the work of unhinging and dislodging what I would call common sense assumptions and everyday ways of talking about race and of making sense about race in our society today. And I'm really talking in part about that great, untidy, dirty world in which race matters outside of the academy, as well as what light we may throw on it from inside. What do I mean by a floating signifier? Well, to put it crudely, race is one of those major concepts which organize the great classificatory systems of difference which operate in human societies. And to say that race is a discursive category recognizes that all attempts to ground this concept scientifically, to locate differences between the races on what one might call scientific, biological, or genetic grounds, have been largely shown to be untenable. We must therefore, it's said, substitute a socio-historical or cultural definition of race for the biological one. As the philosopher Anthony Appiah once put it succinctly, that it's time, as it were, that the biological concept of race was sunk without trace. The differences of color, hair, and bone, though, as he observed, and I quote, clearly defined to the eye of the historian and the sociologist, which is a good thing because there are lots of things sociologists don't see, but he thought that racial difference was something they might just make out. That such things are, on the whole, poorly correlated with genetic difference, and on the other hand, impossible to correlate significantly with cultural, intellectual, or the cognitive characteristics of a people. I want to note 4 things at once about this general position. First, it represents the by now common and conventional wisdom amongst leading scientists in the field. Second, that fact has never prevented intense scholarly activity being devoted by a minority of committed academics to attempting to prove a correlation between racially defined genetic characteristics and cultural performance. In other words, we are not dealing with a field in which, as it were, the scientifically and rationally established fact prevents scientists from continuing to try to prove the opposite. Thirdly, I observe that though the racialized implications of this continuing scientific work into, for example, race and intelligence are vociferously refused and condemned by large numbers of people, certainly by most liberal professionals, and especially by black groups of all kinds, in fact, a great deal of what is said by such groups amongst themselves is predicated precisely on some such assumption, i.e., that some social, political, or cultural phenomenon, like the rightness of a political line, or the merits of a literary and musical production, or the correctness of an attitude or belief, can be traced to and explained by, and especially fixed and guaranteed in its truth by the racial character of the person involved. And that though the genetic explanation of social and cultural behavior is often denounced as racist, the genetic, biological, and physiological definitions of race are alive and well in the common sense discourses of us all. The fact that the biological, physiological, or genetic definition, having been shown out the front door, tends to sidle around the veranda and climb back in through the window. that you can't stop at the surface of the black body itself, as if that, well, I was going to say, as if that brought the argument to a close, but that is exactly why the body is invoked in the discourse in that way, in the hope that it will bring the argument to a close. That if you invoke reality itself, if you say to the blackest person in the room, step this way, somehow pointing to him or her will destroy all my argument. Just look there. That is exactly what the function of invoking the body, as if it is the ultimate transcendental signifier. As if this is, the marker beyond which all argument will stop, all language will cease, all discourse will fall away before this reality. I think we can't turn to the reality of race, because the reality of race itself is what is standing in the way of our understanding, in a profound way, what the meaning is of saying that race is a cultural system. It is a political argument, because so much of the politics, both of race and of anti-race, are founded on the notion that somehow, somewhere, either biology, or genetics, or physiology, or color, or something other than human history and culture will guarantee the truth and authenticity of the things we believe and want to do. It is the search for that guarantee, as much in the politics of anti-racism as in the politics of racism, which makes us, which addicts us to the preservation of the biological trace. It is hard to give up because, in the end, we don't know what it is like to try to conduct a politics, especially a politics of anti-racism, without a guarantee. We need the guarantee. We need to have in the sleep of reason that which says, yes, do it, because it not only feels right and looks right and is the right thing as far as your calculations can take it, but in the end, it will be right. There is something which will make it right. That is because the people holding it, after all, these are the people, these are the good people. How, in the name of people who have come together around this common form of identification, how could they be wrong? But the truth is that, like all ordinary human beings, we could all be wrong, and often are, quite usually are, in fact, in our politics, almost always are, you might say. I mean, the one thing that we are not is guaranteed in the truth of what we do.